I'd like to open the discussion for all panel members. I hope there are plenty of questions. Yes.
Marita Schmiegelow from Novo Nordisk from Regulatory Intelligence and Policy. Thank you so much for 3 very interesting speeches. I have a question to both the MEB and the EMA regarding the first presentations where we saw the low numbers of conditional approvals, accelerated assessments, and exceptional use, and so on. And I have 2 questions. The first is, looking back to 2004, where there really was a forward-looking expectations to these new procedure, how satisfied are the authorities regarding the low numbers?
Is that working? Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Well, coming back to the last part of your question, I don't think we are satisfied with it because the numbers are low. On the other hand, every CHMP meeting, but also national MIB meetings, but also with colleagues, we have these kind of questions, and there is more and more uncertainty in terms of why is the track record of delivering on these post-approval commitments so low by industry. Personally, I don't think it is always the fault of the industry, because there are tons of reasons why a study is not feasible, etc. Reimbursement can be possible, patients that are not wanting to introduce, etc. But this whole picture, and it is not only in Europe, but is also published on the basis of FDA post-approval commitments, makes regulators, and I speak for myself now, more and more reluctant to go into that scenario. Although, of course, it's in the legislation, it's a feasible option, but well, I must say we must be very sure that these post-approval data are delivered. We just had a discussion last night where we had a position where indeed the study was already going on, and where we said, well, we know that the study is going on. We anticipate the data in 2012. This is a good scenario to come for a conditional approval, but that's rare.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, in the sense that you're absolutely right. I mean, there was huge anticipation, I think, 2004-05 as to the potential use of these tools. In particular, not so much the exceptional circumstances which had been with us all through, going back from the beginning, as it were, but more the conditional combined with the accelerated assessment. I think Sandy's metrics showed that there was a lot of sort of hopeful companies knocking on the door in 2005, 2006-07, but with a lot of rejections. And basically what that says is that the committee was not convinced that the degree of innovation, or the perception of the value of the degree of innovation that the company had, the faith in the compound, that wasn't shared by the committee, whether that was a good judgment or not, and that maybe companies now are a little bit more realistic in asking for those accelerated evaluations to take place, and with a 50-50 sort of outcome, there is a more willingness of the committee to engage with that. Subtext to that is, you have to look at another slide from Andy, where like 80% of the work done by 5 to 6 of the delegations, and then it's the willingness of those delegations to actually accelerate that primary assessment, because at the end of the day, that's where the first cut hits, is in that primary assessment. They have to take the burden on of an accelerated assessment. When it comes to the conditional approval frame, certainly it's a good thing that it's not been abused, because it could be abused in a sort of precautionary type approach, that the committee could have abused it to put a stronger, or an apparent stronger framework of follow-up conditions, an artificial use of it, albeit you're dealing really with a full approval, but we'll give you conditional because we really want to make sure you deliver on your post-authorization commitments. That would have been an abuse, and therefore the fact that we're not dealing with there's plenty of good full MAs with quite serious, post-authorization commitments, and with the belief that they will be fully discharged. And then you're left with the idea of life-threatening unmet medical need. And then I think we're back to the same sort of discussion that maybe the company's perception that the value or the innovation that they are delivering is not shared with the committee, because there, with conditional approval, there isn't a downside on the committee with respect to primary assessment time. So they could be more generous if they were, but they have set the hurdle as to they're the ones that they saw over the years as meeting this high threshold, at least as they interpret the regulation. Others would have a different view, and it would be an interesting debate to reflect on the ones that got full approval as opposed to conditional, or maybe even the withdrawn ones that weren't accepted for conditional, to see are the committee too difficult in granting it, or whether they could liberalise it a bit more going forward. So, but again, I have to give it back to Bert, because at the end of the day, these are the guys that are setting where that threshold is. But the idea that there couldn't be an open discussion as to, what leads to it, like why this product and not the other product, all the information is there, so that can happen. It would be a good topic to develop.
It was just the second question I want to raise. Is a hurdle or barrier too high? Because we have heard several times regarding that the patient's perspectives may be different, and we may consider here whether we are in the right direction regarding unmet medical need.
Do you mean the barrier for approval? Are you saying is the barrier for any sort of approval?
No, to obtain the conditional approval. It may be the hurdles to obtain it is too high.
My personal view is I don't think so, and I think Tony's answer was really saying you're better off getting more full approvals than more conditionals. But Professor Leufkens, what?
No,
Okay. Thank you.
Anu Tummavori from Celgene. Maybe I haven't, I guess the question is mainly for Tony. Perhaps I haven't really understood the new pharmacovigilance legislation, but I somehow struggle a little bit understanding here regarding Article 107I, that in which situations that would be used versus Article 20s. Because if we look at in the initial graph when it was shown that many of the issues related to safety are not safety only, and if you look at the products that have gone through Article 20, some of the procedures vary hugely in length, and many of them have had several rounds of questions that the applicant had needed to reply. And I'm just struggling to understand in which situations referral procedure would be Article 107I, which would then be very fixed procedure without clock stop, and in which cases the procedure would still be Article 20.
Yeah, I mean, I can make a confession that I probably don't understand fully the pharmacovig legislation myself, because it's actually the way it's written, as usual, is like piecemeal amendments to other parts of the legislation. When you stick it all together, it's a very, very significant piece of legislation. I think just for the very technical amongst us, the fact that the Commission have even sought to reinforce the automatic nature of the use of the Article 107 provision in their recent information to patients resurrection in terms of a new proposal. Half of that new proposal represents a tightening up of even the proposed legislation that's coming into force as of July next year, because even that isn't considered clear enough with respect to the start of the procedure. And the whole thrust of it, and it's absolutely post-mediator, the whole thrust of it is essentially to not allow the possibility that issues can be left at the national level, and that they really should, if there's issues of significant public health, that they can be certainly initiated and identified at the national level, but because the same active, same products are right across the union, they have to be addressed with a European position and with urgency as well. The idea that we will spend 2 years in the 31 with re-examinations and clock stops and 6 months, list of questions, etc., that just isn't the spirit or the philosophy of the new legislation. If a member state genuinely believes they're dealing with an urgent safety issue, no matter what the product type, they're meant to trigger the 107, and the European view is meant to emerge within a few months. And maybe, I mean, I don't want to sound too alarmist with no clock stop, etc. That's maybe not a bad idea, that there is a European view on an emerging issue very quickly, because it doesn't preclude a follow-up procedure or a follow-up action that might be more considered, more measured. But certainly, you know, the real challenge is, do you need to take urgent action, even extreme suspension or recall or restriction, you know, a letter to doctors, whatever. You know, the idea that we have a European view on that, rather than just sort of one member state taking action and then the rest of the member states playing catch up at a differential timeline and trying to explain that to the politicians and the media and the patients and the doctors, it's really not explainable. But coming back to your question, and I mean, it is at this moment in time, it's a question of urgency, pharmacovigilance data, and the criteria. And today, it's still left up to the discretion of the member state and or the Commission maybe as a safety net, depending on their awareness of the issue. If the information to patients were to be adopted and implemented tomorrow, that situation would radically change. It would become a much more automatic procedure, even for things like introducing a contraindication in a nationally authorised product would then become a European procedure. And that's quite a radical shift. Yeah? But today, because that's not going to happen in terms of having that legislation even by next July, today we're looking at a threshold, a borderline, that the member states, and possibly consulting the PRAC even in a prophylactic kind of way, will work to try to understand what that threshold should be. I mean, personally, I think there's a room for all three, the Article 20, the 31, and the 107I, you know, and the balance between them will be a very interesting one to establish over the next couple of years.
Thanks, Tony. It sounds like we need to come to the equivalent session to this one in 2 or 3 years' time to find out. But I think a bit of flexibility in the system is always a good thing. Are there any final questions for this session? I can't see any, so I think it's time for our next coffee break. Thank you.